the data source is not the correct column name. So these are column names. You can double click on it and change. Since I know this is country name, I need to change now? I don't need to change because the country name and the country code is already here. So I will not change anything now for the now, but you can change the name by double clicking on it. You can sort by clicking on the icon here. You can say how it should be sorting, sort ascending or sort descending. You can remove the empty cells here, or you can select only sum of parts. So it will affect the data when you load. So what if you remove something from here? You can remove that, but it will always exclude the data, exclude those partitions from the when you are loading the data into the Power BI. So let's say if I unselect blank and I click OK, so now you can see all the blank ones are gone already, right? So we can actually do this way again. Last updated date also we can remove. So we can search last updated date and remove it. So that's one way of doing it. Instead of deleting it, we have removed only just hided them. Now we know that the country, this is the column name, and it should be the header. It should be the table. It should be the column name itself. So we have a option in Power BI desktop in Power Query to promote the header rows, and that's here. Use first row as header. So we click it, and now you can see Power BI has added a few steps here. After the change type, it was three steps. Now we have three more steps. One is the filtered rows. We have filtered some rows. We have promoted header one and the change the type one. So uh, because it's a one because it has it's a repeat of the previous task. So it's one. Now you will see the name of the column is already changed to country name, country code, indicator name, indicator code, and the 1960. This is 0.12 means it's a number format. ABC means it's a text format. So now if you click on it, sorry, if you right click on it, you can see the type, change the type. Change the type means it's at the moment is on text, but you can change the type to anything. So the column type is automatically selected by the Power BI Power Query based on what the data is. So it will always check if the data has numbers, it will change it to numbers. If the data has text, it will change it to text. If the data has anything else, it will change. If it has a date, it will select the date automatically. If it does not, you can change the name. You can change it again. So it's a country name, country code. You don't need to do anything. Indicator name. I know this is a GDP because that's the file name already. So do I need to keep this column? In Power BI, whenever we are working with the data visualization, the one formula that we have to remember is always that the number of columns should be minimum. What does that mean? That means is that if we need to keep only the necessary columns for which are important for us to do the data analysis. Now, GDP current is because it's in dollars already, we know these are in dollars, and we know this is GDP because the file is only for GDP numbers. So this column is actually irrelevant for us. So we have choices here. We could, like we did the filter of the column, we hided the column. We can go ahead and say, okay, we don't want this column. So we will select this column and remove it from here. So when we are removing the column, you have a choice here on the top in home ribbon, manage columns. You will go to say remove the column. So you can click on the drop down, remove column. It will give you two choices, remove columns or remove other columns. If you click remove other columns, it will keep the column which is selected and remove everything else, which is we don't want. We want to remove only the selected one. So we will click on remove columns. We remove the column is gone, and the step is here, right? And then otherwise, so that's the one way. The second way is you can undo it and the column will be back. You can choose the columns. So like we choose the rows from the filter to see what column we want, we can say choose the column. It will open up the column list for us what columns we are using. So we have all these columns, right? Now we don't want indicator name and we don't want indicator code because they are not relevant for us. So what we will do is we will unhide them, select them and click OK. So both these columns are gone now and you can say removed other columns. So the step is the same, the method is different. So there are two methods. One is choose column, another is remove column. For the difference between the two is that remove for getting back the columns which you have removed, you have to remove the step itself. While for choose column, if you follow this method, then you can just click again the choose column and click back the columns. So that is the easier method. So whenever you are in the doubt that you may need this column, you may not need this column, choose column. If you are sure that column is not required, remove column. That's the easier way, right? Then that so that's about the columns, correct? So adding the column, removing the column, that's the way. We have not learned add the column, we will learn it later, but we have learned how we delete the column, which is not necessary. Now you will see we still have a lot of columns: 1960, 1961, 1962. So how we are going to use them, right? Because they are not, this is not against, this is not as per the wisdom that I said earlier, that we need to minimize the column. Now we have so many columns, so how do we remove them? So there is an option in Power BI which says that we can solve this by keeping converting all these into one single column. Now, what you see here is a like a pivot table. If you are aware with the Excel, it summarizes the data into a pivot table, right? So you have a country name, and you on the columns you have the country name, and the data is sorted out like summarized, right? So it means that if the data is on the normal cell, one row, Aruba 1960, what is the GDP? Aruba 1961, what is the GDP? So you need basically these three columns or maybe four for country code at max. So how do we achieve it? We have option in this option called transform. We click on transform. There is a option for doing the unpivot columns. So you can see this here, unpivot column under transform. Go to any column in the any column section and find unpivot columns. So you will be able to see unpivot columns. So which columns we need to unpivot? We need to select. So we will select, because we have many columns to unpivot. We will not select those columns. We will select the columns which we don't need to pivot. So which are these two? Enter company name and the country code. So click on shift and enter click on the control button in your keyboard and select both the columns. So now we know these two columns we don't want to pivot, right? Unpivot. Now we can click on the drop box, the drop icon link, and now it is giving me option unpivot these columns, unpivot other columns, or unpivot selected columns. So we don't want to do anything with the selected columns. We want to do with an other column. So unpivot other column. So click on it. Now the table has changed dramatically. So now you will see instead of the columns, the query has converted into a row. So now is Aruba 1994. The is the value is given. Aruba 1995 value is given. So these are the GDP for each year. So by default, Power BI has used the name attribute and value, right? So now we need to change that. So now this is year. So we can double click on it and we can type it year. Or the other way was instead of double clicking it, you could right click and use rename. Where is it? Here in the last, rename, right? You can use rename, and this is country GDP in US dollars. So we can say dollar in USD so that we know this is in US dollar, and we hit enter. Now now we have country name, country code, year, and GDP. So that is the data visualization that we wanted to do with it. So that there's nothing else that we wanted to do for this particular file. So once you click it, you will be able to see what is the value here underneath. This has not much of the value unless we will see that in the future when we are creating the measures or other things. So you can see what is happening here. So that is the basic of data modeling, the very basic of the data modeling. Now there are other files as well in the folder. Let's do them. Let's gather them as well. So to go back to the our original to get data is close and apply. So we go to home again and we click close and apply. So close and apply means it will load this into the Power BI desktop. So now you have to just wait for a while, and the country GDP is loading into the model. So now 9,400 items has been loaded. Now you will see the situation has little bit changed. So on the fields pane, you will see one table is like a table icon is available here, country GDP, where you have four columns: country code, country name, country GDP in US dollar, and it has an equal sign here, which means that it's a number which can be used for manipulation. We never use just bare columns into the visualization. We can, even though we can, but if we, especially when it's number, we always work with something called measure that we will learn later. And then you have a year, which also we can use for our analysis, right? Now, you will see build visual with your data already is available, because now we can just drop and drag. It's easy. So now let's say if we want to do a very basic one, let's do a